the case of Rogel Aguilera-Mederos, that's a truck driver who was sentenced to 110 years in prison for causing a crash that killed 4 people when his brakes went out. He was not under the influence of alcohol or any intoxicants. He did not act intentionally at all. He is simply a truck driver who had his brakes go out. And we've seen that since he was essentially sentenced to 110 years in prison, there's been significant outcry. And now a district court judge has essentially set a hearing for resentencing, really opening up the possibility that potentially this man could possibly get a portion of his life back. We know that during a scheduling conference yesterday, the district court judge, Bruce Jones, set a resentencing hearing for January 13th at the request of First Judicial District Attorney, that's essentially the prosecutor there, Alex King. King plans to ask for a new sentence of 20 to 30 years, she said. And we'll talk a little bit about this sentence, but to give you a complete recap of the situation here, Aguilera-Mederos, he was found guilty of 24 charges in April 25th, 2019. From the crash that killed 4 people on Interstate 70. The 26-year-old Cuban immigrant was not charged with driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Rather, his brakes failed on the high country route, according to the testimony he later gave investigators. The sentence sparked an international outcry and led more than 4.9 million people and counting to sign a change org petition calling on Colorado Governor Jared Polis to grant Aguilera-Mederos clemency or commute his sentence. Now, Jones said during the original December 16th sentencing hearing that Colorado law left him no choice but to deliver the 110-year sentence due to the requirements that sentences for crimes of violence run consecutively. So essentially they're running one after the other and not at the same time. According to Jones's interpretation of the law, that was the minimum amount of prison time he could assign to Aguilera-Mederos. And the thing is that this is problematic because even if we're looking at a potential of 20 to 30 years, we have to remember this man is a truck driver. His brakes went out. He had no control over the situation whatsoever. I don't believe there was any finding that he was negligent in not caring for the service of his vehicle, that this was a matter of something that happens to truck drivers, which is why there has been such a significant outcry. Also, the thought that there'd be 20 to 30 years potentially of his life. This man is a young father, and it is very problematic. And even the judge recognizes that. The district court judge, that's Bruce Jones, he said he has some doubts when it comes to resentencing. Jones expressed some trepidation about the prospect of a resentencing hearing before the case could be appealed. Aguilera-Mederos' lawyer have 149 days to file the appeal, he said, which they haven't done yet, which is understandable because they don't want to enter the appellate jurisdiction while they're trying to get a resentencing. So the deadline for Mederos and his legal team to appeal is 49 days after the sentencing, which would technically be January 31st, 2022. Mederos also has up to a year from the December 13th sentencing, where he got 110 years, to file a motion under Rule 35B for the judge to reconsider his sentence. Now, that motion, I'm sure, will be filed, but in the meantime, even having a prosecutor recommend 20 to 30 years, this isn't right, David.
Yeah, it's not fair at all. I mean, he, as you pointed out, he didn't own this truck. It was not his truck. He was essentially just using it to transport materials. Where's the owner of the truck? Where's the person who was responsible for checking the maintenance and the brakes and the engine and everything else? That is the group that needs to be held accountable. This guy is gonna live for the rest of his life knowing that he was involved in an accident that killed a family of 4. That's enough of a burden on any human being. You don't need to add to it by giving him 20 or 30 years. I think the governor should commute his sentence, and the folks in Colorado should focus all of their prosecutorial authority and resources on going after the owner of the truck, the people who were negligent for the brakes. That's where the outrage should land. It shouldn't be on this poor guy who was just doing his job to the best of his ability.
Absolutely. The fact that this 26-year-old Cuban immigrant who is a father was driving a truck that had failed brakes. This happens. That's why they have those rollaway docks on the side of the trucking routes, just in case your brakes fail and you have a problem. And you know what? The thing I do appreciate seeing is so many people rally and the truckers to also come together and interfere with interstate commerce, saying we're not going through Colorado. If this is what you're going to do to one of us, you're going to do it to all of us in the event that this tragedy happens to us. And the fact is that essentially the sentence needs to change, that society needs to change, and we've got to get away from this penal system that does not allow for actual justice to be done.